We pick up Act 4, Scene 3 at line 140. Malcolm and Macduff's discussion about loyalty and treachery is abruptly interrupted by the arrival of a doctor, who informs them that there is a crew of wretched souls that stay the king's cure. Their malady convinces the great assay of art, but at his touch such sanctity hath heaven given his hand, they presently amend. Edward III, otherwise known as Edward the Confessor, ruled England from 1042 until his death in 1066. Known for his religious devotion, he was thought to possess the divine power to cure a disease known as scrofula, or the king's evil, an inflammation of the lymph nodes leading to ulcers on the body, caused by the breathing in of air contaminated with bacteria. A reliable cure for it was not found until the 19th century discovery of antibiotics. Malcolm explains to Macduff that it is a most miraculous work in this good king, which often since my here remain in England I have seen him do. He doesn't know how he does it, but strangely visited people, all swollen and ulcerous, pitiful to the eye, the mere despair of surgery he cures, hanging a golden stamp about their necks put on with holy prayers. The golden stamp he's referring to here was a coin or medal known as a touch piece that the monarch gave the cured person after he had put his healing hands on them. He explains that Edward has bequeathed his gift to his successors, and 'tis spoken to the succeeding royalty he leaves the healing benediction. In addition to this divine talent, he also hath a heavenly gift of prophecy, and sundry blessings hang about his throne that speak him full of grace. As the audience never gets to meet this saintly monarch, we have to ask ourselves what the dramatic purpose of this piece of dialogue is. What it actually achieves is twofold. Not only does it allow Shakespeare to elevate the fight for the crown of Scotland to one of a battle between heaven and hell, but it also has a function beyond the drama of the play, in that it gives Shakespeare another opportunity to flatter his king, with a nod to the fact that he continued Edward's practices of giving out touch pieces to those he healed. Ross enters. Malcolm does not immediately recognise him, although he knows, presumably from his tartan, that he is my countryman. Macduff asks him if Scotland is still in the same state as it was when he left it. Ross sadly confirms that it is. Alas, poor country, almost afraid to know itself, it cannot be called our mother, but our grave, where nothing but who knows nothing is once seen to smile. In other words, only those who are ignorant of what is going on are able to smile. The air is filled with sighs and groans and shrieks that rend the air. The sound of the funeral bell, or deadman's knell, is so common that no one bothers to ask any more who it is for, as good men's lives expire before the flowers in their caps. Macduff laments that this description is too nice or too detailed and yet too true. Malcolm demands to know what's the newest grief, but Ross replies that news of a bad event that's even an hour old is out of date because each minute teems a new one. Macduff switches the subject over to his own wife, asking Ross how she does. We know that he has bad news to impart on that score, and yet he hesitates to break it to him, preferring to equivocate by telling him that she and their children were well at peace when I did leave 'em. Macduff is irritated that Ross is less than forthcoming and demands that he give more detail. But Ross continues to dodge him, preferring instead to speak about the army he has witnessed to have been raised by Macbeth. When I came hither to transport the tidings which I have heavily borne, there ran a rumour of many worthy fellows that were out, which was to my belief witnessed the rather, for that I saw the tyrant's power afoot. He directly appeals to Malcolm to return to Scotland, saying that his presence would create soldiers, make our women fight to doff their dire distresses. Malcolm reassures him that he has every intention of returning, as the king has promised him 10,000 men led by good Seward, or the Earl of Northumberland, an older and better soldier none that Christendom gives out. Ross laments that he is not able to respond to this reassurance in a like manner because he has something terrible to tell them. But I have words that would be howled out in the desert air, where hearing should not catch them. Macduff immediately wants to know if this awful news relates to the general cause, or if it concerns one person in particular. Ross concedes that anyone who is of an honest nature would feel some kind of grief, though the main part pertains to you alone. Macduff demands that Ross put him out of his misery immediately. Ross hopes that his ears will not hate the sound of his voice for ever, which shall possess them with the heaviest sound that ever yet they heard. And he proceeds to tell him, "Your castle is surprised, your wife and babes savagely slaughtered." He refuses to give him any more detail as to how they died, as he fears that it would be just too much for him to bear. Malcolm scolds Macduff for trying to hide his grief, warning him that if he bottles it all up, his heart will break under the strain. Merciful heavens, what man, ne'er pull your hat upon your brows. Give sorrow words. The grief that does not speak whispers the o'erfraught heart and bids it break. Macduff is overwhelmed, unable to believe that he has understood Ross correctly. My children too. Wife, children, servants, all that could be found. And I must be from hence? My wife killed too? I have said. Malcolm tries to offer Macduff some solace. Be comforted. Let's make us medicines of our great revenge to cure this deadly grief. When Macduff responds, he has no children, it is unclear here to whom he is referring. Does he mean Malcolm, who, being young and having no children himself, cannot possibly understand what it is to lose a child, and therefore appreciate that no amount of revenge will ever cure this deadly grief? Or is he referring to Macbeth, who also has no children, and will therefore not be able to suffer the retribution of a child for a child? Malcolm now implores him to dispute it like a man, or bear it bravely. Macduff assures him that he has every intention of doing so, but I must also feel it as a man. I cannot but remember such things that were most precious to me. I.e., he's not an automaton, and he must allow himself to grieve, as he can't blank out all the things in his life that meant everything to him. He blames himself for their deaths. Sinful Macduff! They were all struck for thee, naught that I am, not for their own demerits, but for mine, fell slaughter on their souls. Heaven rest them now. Malcolm encourages him to take this feeling and use it to metaphorically sharpen his sword, so that grief convert to anger. Macduff replies that he could play the woman with mine eyes and braggart with my tongue. In other words, he could weep like a woman and make empty threats, but he's not going to waste his time. Rather, he wants to cut short all intermission and get front to front, or face to face, with this fiend of Scotland within my sword's length. Malcolm approves of his resolve, announcing that their power is ready and that there is nothing stopping them from leaving right now. Macbeth, he says, is ripe for shaking, and the powers above put on their instruments. Note how Malcolm is claiming that the forces of good are on their side, as he imagines them arming themselves for the battle, in much the same way that Lady Macbeth invoked the powers of evil before the murder of Duncan. They exit with the stage set for the final act. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions, please let me know in the comments section below, and I'll do my best to answer them. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel for more videos on English language topics and exam techniques, and English literature text.